Welcome to Transformation Talks, your guide to navigating complex change. Each episode brings you expert insights, practical strategies, and real-world stories on delivering impactful transformation. From managing technology rollouts to driving cultural shifts, we'll help you tackle the challenges of change and build lasting success. I'm Hayley Sage, Head of Marketing for one of the UK's leading management consultancies, and for the next 30 minutes, your podcast host. Today, we're diving into one of the most urgent and complex challenges facing modern organisations, navigating continuous change in an increasingly digital world. In this episode, I'm joined by Estelle Eades, a thought leader in change management who specialises in culture and behavioural change to support complex transformation. Estelle, welcome to the Project One podcast booth.
Thank you very much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
It's great to have you, particularly because you are a thought leader in change management, and I can't wait to dig a little bit deeper and get some of that expertise out there for our audience. And today I wanted to talk to you about the notion of continuous change.
Yes.
This is something that we're seeing out there, aren't we? And what I'd like to know more about is, where has this notion of continuous change come from, and how have things changed?
Yes, well, absolutely. I think in the world we live in today, everything is becoming more digital all the time. Digitization is a big factor here. As more and more organisations become digitally enabled, then we're seeing that the pace of change is accelerating and quickening constantly. The demands of customers, they expect everything to be instant. The ability to be able to stay ahead of your competition, to be able to respond to market nuances and dynamics means that we need to embrace that digital capability. We're using it more. So the more ability we have to change, then the more need there is to change and the demand for it. So we're seeing that accelerate exponentially in line with our ability to change. There's nothing more than the pandemic that really sort of brought that to light. What we saw happen over a period of a year to 18 months, we would have traditionally expected to see happen over a 5 to 10 year period in terms of that digital capability and that evolution of digitization effectively. Overnight, organisations suddenly went from operating, some of them still paper-based at the time, to being able to actually deal with all of their customer needs remotely, and everybody having to be able to work remotely. That was phenomenal, and that really forced organisations to either adapt quickly or fail. And therefore, we're now in a place where organisations are suddenly much more digitally enabled, and that just continues. I was talking to a customer recently as well about this concept of constant change, and they were saying that they're embarking on their next phase of 4-year transformation. It's not a transformation itself, it's the next phase of it. And he was saying to me, Estelle, the problem is, by the time we get to where we want to be, I know that the world, the market, the industry we're working in is going to have changed again. It's going to have moved on. And so actually, we're never really going to reach that point. And that's exactly this concept of continuous change. The fact that no longer is there a nice, neat start, middle, and an end to it. You've got to be able to continuously adapt.
And run various aspects all in parallel and continually adapt, evolve.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And the real differentiator, the ability to adapt, is all about culture.
Of course, because people are absolutely key, and we hear that again and again in the podcast. The culture is key in making that happen. So the point is, it's no longer enough just to manage change.
No, you're absolutely right. Whereas previously and sort of traditionally, the playbook would say you've got a nice transformation that's got a lovely shape to it and you know when you're going to get there. The problem we have nowadays is that playbook doesn't hold up. You've got to be able to recognise that by the time you get to where you think you're going to go at this point and 5 years down the line, things will have changed, and you've got to be able to adapt to that along the way. Organisations are often facing multiple concurrent changes at once. They're having to respond to not just an internal technology upgrade. They're responding to market changes, regulatory changes. All of these things are constantly shifting the dynamic of what they need to deliver. Customer expectations constantly changing as well. So that means that they're no longer in a space of managing a specific change, but in being in a place of enabling change, constantly being able to change effectively. And that's all about enabling and building that core capability into your organization. I'm seeing a fundamental shift out there in the C-suite. They're starting to talk about and recognize that it's not about adapting our technology, it's not about adapting our systems and our products, but they're recognizing the need to think about the ability to continuously learn. How do they make sure that the mindset of their people is in the right place? How do they build the right environment so people can constantly collaborate and come up with new ideas? Yeah, effectively that environment has significantly changed for organizations in terms of how they operate.
So what do organisations need to be doing differently now?
Well, the first thing that they need to do is they need to look at the culture. They need to understand, have they got the culture right? And is it aligned to their transformation goals? Culture's often described, you hear people talk about, it's the way things get done around here. This is how it really happens. Culture's that invisible thing. It's that thread that ties everybody together. It's really powerful, but you can't see it. It's a bit like gravity. And it just pulls everything in a particular direction, whether you want it to or not.
I like that analogy.
It's lovely, isn't it? You can imagine if you get that culture right and you align it to those transformational goals, it's going to pull people naturally towards that vision, that North Star that you're focusing on. So to change your outcomes and to change where you're going, you need to change what's normal in the everyday working, the everyday behaviours. So you've got to create that environment where people feel safe to challenge the norm, to do things differently. And you've got to focus on things like that, psychological safety. You hear this term time and time again at the moment. Yeah. And it's really about the ability to challenge the status quo. Ask the silly questions. Why are we doing it this way? Can we do it differently? And feel safe to do that. But then also you've got to set the environment where, people are included. Because you're only going to get people challenging that if you've got everyone around the table and everybody, with different perspectives around it, that are going to ask these questions and go, Haley, why are we doing it this way?
And that's the strength, isn't it, of the team and of the people, is having those different perspectives to make sure you're going in the right direction.
Precisely. And that is for leaders to do. It's leaders to make sure that environment's set up correctly. You've got the environment where people include others. You listen to what people have to say. You invite people to the party.
Who should be accountable for seeing the signs if they haven't quite got that right yet?
So effectively, it starts with leadership. As I say, it's that C-suite team. And then it's leadership at every level. Culture starts with leaders. It's their tone. It's their decisions. It's what they acknowledge and recognise as being acceptable or not acceptable in the behaviours and the ways of working. It's also leaders that ultimately create the environment, the organisational systems, such as the governance structures that determine how decision-making takes place, the reward system that recognises what people are rewarded on in terms of their behaviours and ways of working. So leaders ultimately are accountable. They need to align as a team around the kind of culture that they want to see for the organisation, and then everything should, in theory, flow from that.
And what about the signs or the red flags, I suppose? What should people look out for to show them that maybe they haven't got this right yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So a really obvious one is silence. Silence in meetings. I love it when you sit sometimes. I'll sit in an exec meeting watching from afar as to the dynamics and how things go on. And a question will be asked. And you can hear a pin drop. No one speaks up. Everyone's waiting. No one wants to be the first one. I might look silly. That is often a sign that people fear, looking silly. They are scared to challenge the status quo. They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe to put their neck out and say, is that right? Or why? Well, I'm not sure I get it. So that's really important. Signs can also, though, outside of meetings, you can often see that people aren't really talking about the change. They're not talking about what's going on. That can be a bit of an indicator that there's low engagement or even a bit of resistance. And that could be because people don't trust, perhaps, the change. They don't trust that it's actually going to happen. That could be that leaders aren't walking the talk. They're saying one thing, but then they're not behaving in the same way. And that just disenfranchises, that causes people to disengage because they don't believe in it. Yeah, it's critical that leaders are visible and they're authentic. They really are walking the talk effectively. Harvard Business Review recently did a bit of a study, and they found that if senior leaders are not visibly involved in the change, then the transformation efforts are twice as more likely to fail than if they are, which is phenomenal. You can see often, as well as that sort of inconsistency in leadership behaviours, look out for things like change fatigue. Always a key concern in this environment of continuous change. People feeling overwhelmed, just a bit exhausted, or even excluded. They've not been invited because people haven't got sufficient time to sit back and think, oh, I should bring Hayley into this conversation. Who else should I invite? And then as a result, you don't get that sort of really richness of conversation, that challenge that's needed to really push the boundaries and take you forward. But that sort of overwhelming feeling, people looking just exhausted from it, sometimes it's not the fact that there's too much change. Sometimes it's the fact that they don't understand why we're changing again. So you set the parameters, Estelle, you set the goalpost, that's the North Star we're going after. Why have we changed it halfway through? Oh, well, we're changing it again, are we now? We're going to yellow rather than blue. This is the world we live in now. We have to constantly adapt. But that can be exhausting when you feel you've been going after it for a year. Oh, and we've got to redo the business case. Another 18 months. I mean, working with a customer at the moment, and they have literally just got their business case agreed after 4 iterations over 2 years. I mean, it's just the way of it. But these are enormous programs, enormous transformations, and things change along the way and they have to adapt. So helping people understand the rationale for that, why it's worth redoing it, will help them to stay engaged with it.
Back to the importance of communication.
Exactly. It's really important. And that's down to leaders to make sure that people understand why we're doing this, what's in it for them, and why we're changing it along the way.
Yeah.
And keeping them informed.
And so how about the people? How does it affect the people in terms of what skills and capabilities are needed to keep pace with this type of transformation?
Yeah, great question. Because it isn't, you're right, it's not just all about leaders, it's about the workforce as well. And I guess the obvious one is resilience. Resilience is critical. So it's not just about bouncing back from that constant change, but it's also about the ability to stay productive in uncertainty, where there's ambiguity, and stay focused. The other things that we see a lot of is that ability to learn, constantly adapt. No longer do you just want someone who can come in and be the best solution architect you've ever seen. They need to be able to learn new things because technology is evolving so quickly. For the course of their career, they've got to have a growth mindset and be able to constantly challenge themselves and their thinking. Digital acumen goes alongside that sort of thing. And when we talk about digital acumen, this isn't the sort of technical capability. It's around that ability to understand how will technology affect what people do and what people will do in the future. So being able to translate it and understand the impacts of the change for people.
Okay, can you expand on how people can achieve this?
Obvious stuff, I guess, is collaboration, ability to influence. We work now in organisations that have to work cross functions. They bring skill sets across finance, technology, customer, sales together in one team to define the product and to deliver it to the customer. And therefore, you've got to be able to collaborate. You've got to be able to influence your colleagues and help to everybody to move in the same direction. And that takes emotional intelligence. And so your workforce, these are the kind of skills that you're now recruiting for.
And that's what you've got to, like you say, keep an eye on in that recruitment process to build a strong team who's going to be able to help the business achieve the goals, the long-term goals.
So it's no longer just those technical skill sets you're looking for. It's all these additional skills that enable your organisation to constantly adapt and accept change. But it's not just your people. I mean, your leaders have to think about their skills. They've got to be able to create that right environment. They've got to be able to give people stretch opportunities. They've got to accept that failure is part of growth. That's a very different mindset to our traditional leaders of 40, 50 years ago. They've got to embrace this sort of fail fast environment.
Fail fast, be bold,
Yeah.
start again in the right direction.
Yeah. Be vulnerable, be authentic, be empathetic. Allow people to try something. It doesn't matter. It doesn't work. The key is around progress. It's about keep moving forwards.
And being agile.
Yes, exactly.
And as change is constantly evolving, how do you see the discipline of change management changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, you just said it yourself. I think one of the key things is around agile. We see that the change management is going to be something that needs to be able to deliver within an agile environment. You've got to be able to engage with that agile way of working, that agile operation. It's no longer that you can sit on the sideline and go, here's a very clearly defined set of requirements, and I'm going to go and work out now what the training needs are, and then come back and tell everybody what that training plan looks like. I've got to be able to constantly adapt because the requirements are changing as we're developing the product, and collectively you've got to be able to design what that outcome and what that solution is going to be, and be able to adapt how you're going to deliver that and take people on that journey as a group as you go. So agile is going to be key in terms of how change management is delivered. I think being data driven is huge. We're using analytics more and more, being able to measure that readiness, that adoption as you go. Is it working? And being able to adapt your change interventions in real time. Things like Habitrack, these sorts of tools are really key to being able to see, are people actually adopting the change? How are they changing their behaviours? And if they're not changing quickly enough, what do we need to do differently? What additional information or additional skills do we need to give them to help them along that journey?
And do you think AI should be a consideration?
I think we'll see that change management really starts to think about AI as well. It's really important, not just from the perspective of how do we leverage AI as part of our change management tool set. Absolutely, that's going to be key. AI will be brilliant in taking the as is and the to be processes and very quickly being able to determine, this is my nirvana, Hayley, where it can tell us what all those change impacts are. And then we can quickly get to where we need to go in terms of determining our interventions plan. But we'll also need to think about AI as a member of the workforce going forwards. How do we think about them as part of that organisational construct and use them as a resource alongside Hayley and alongside Estelle and design the organisation and the change around AI?
It's an exciting time though, isn't it? I mean, it's such a fascinating world to live in and see how change evolves in so many different organisations, and the fast-paced nature of it must make your days all very different.
It does. And obviously you don't have a career in change management unless you absolutely adore change. So for me, it's just a wonderful time to be working in. Having a career at this point is fantastic. Change is accelerating exponentially beyond belief. And the skills that we need as change managers are changing as well. No longer do we come in and be this all-telling orator around, this is how you do it. These are the magic tools that we use for change management. It's much more now about being a storyteller, helping to provide clarity around complex change environments, make it understandable for people, helping to architect and shape that change and how you deliver that change, architect the culture that allows that change to evolve and deliver more efficiently and effectively because your culture is aligned to your transformational goals. We're kind of more like a curator really now than this expert person that can just come in and tell you everything. We help you make sense of the information available to you.
Which I'm sure is amazing for many people in these organisations who have a huge responsibility on their shoulders, but to be able to work with people and allow them to see the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess.
Quite. I mean, the information is out there available to everybody, isn't it? And I think, C-suites have it all at their fingertips in this wonderful digitally enabled environment. But the value I bring is around helping them to make sense of all that information on how to build culture and what way to do it and what tools to use in enabling that.
And you've got such a huge amount of experience that people can pull on. So one question that I always ask our guests is, knowing what you know now, what piece of advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
Oh gosh. Okay. One piece of advice. That's hard. I guess focus on people, not the process. I mean, as we said, culture is all about emotion. It drives change. It's much more about the people than checklists and processes. I guess don't assume or mistake resistance for negativity.
Okay.
Key thing. Resistance often means that somebody cares. They're bothered by it. So listen to what they have to say. What they're saying actually will give you insights. So resistance is insight in disguise, is what I'd say.
Very nice. Thank you. And thank you for being a guest today on the podcast. I've certainly learned a lot, which I feel like I do every time I interview somebody on this podcast. So I really appreciate your time today. And I'm sure if our guests have any questions, they can reach out and you'd be happy to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Hayley, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Estelle. Thanks for tuning in to Transformation Talks. We hope you found today's insights valuable in your journey to leading successful transformation. If this topic has interested you and you want to know more, you can contact Estelle via her email estelle.eades@projectone.com or start up a conversation with her on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share it with your network. Stay connected with us for more expert insight and stories on delivering complex change and transformation in any organisation. See you next time.